There we go.
Woohoo!
Hello, everybody. We are here with Leah Kyaio.
Kyaio?
Kyaio. There we go. How you doing today?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
Doing all right. I'm doing all right.
Okay.
Yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. What are you feeling about talking about?
Um, well, we can talk about just about anything you want. I don't know. Give me a suggestion. You know me well enough to know something I like to talk about.
Okay. Horses.
Oh, I love to talk about horses. But what do we want to talk about horses?
What do you want to talk to about horses?
I want to talk about the fact that we don't understand them very well as a species, like
Well,
we
that's
as the species.
I think that can be said for any species on Earth. We don't even really understand each other.
Truth, sister. Yep.
Yeah, we're barely scratching the surface on ourselves, much less animals.
Would be very, very true. I
Yeah.
think sometimes, though, that we forget that horses are prey animals and we're predators,
Yeah.
and so there's a gift there, right? It's an honor to be in relationship with a horse because another predator, you just got to be stronger, bigger, faster, dominant. But
Yeah.
with a prey animal, as a predator, it's a whole lot of nuance that if you don't get it right, they don't honor you with that relationship. So it's, I mean, you can certainly you know, you can beat anything into submission, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about
Yeah.
relationships,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. Definitely. I believe the
Yep.
original topic was teaching through the lens of respect, but I wasn't sure if you still wanted to talk about that.
Sure. Because I mean that's what I do with horses too, right? Isn't that's
Yeah.
I mean, everything I do is through that lens of respect. And what does it mean to be respectful? And I think that we have this idea. So I've gone into many high school classrooms in particular, and you pose the question, right?
Yeah.
Is respect earned or given?
Mm,
Most of them will tell you it's earned.
yeah.
And then I challenge because I walked through the door, stood up in front, and all of them are sitting quietly, listening, paying attention, taking turns talking. I'm like, so why are you respectful?
Yeah.
Well, you're a teacher. So does my title earn that for me? Well, so you're telling me you respect every one of your teachers, right? Uh-huh. So really
Hmm.
helping people to think about what we mean when we talk about respect, because bottom line, I don't have to know you, like you, or accept you to be respectful.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when we start to think about what I do to me, I do to you, what I do to you, I do to me, because we're all interconnected,
Yes, we are.
it and that changes how we interact with each other. Because now I have to consider not do I treat you the way I want to be treated, but do I treat you in a way that I would expect you to treat me?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And then the questions, right? The questions of when I see someone who is enraged or judgmental.
Yeah.
That tells me way more about them than it does about anyone they're talking to.
Agreed. Agreed. I tend to think that if you've let yourself go so far that if you're enraged and screaming or throwing things, that there's an issue that needs to be addressed. I mean, like there needs to be an internal issue. I get it that life can be shitty and it can
Mhm.
be painful and it can be rough, but you don't need to traumatize people around you,
Mm-mm.
in reaction to that.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and interestingly enough, right? Who do we traumatize the most? The people we love the most,
Oh yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
that's where we feel safe. And so somehow we know that no matter how we behave, quote unquote, you'll still love me.
And
Yeah.
that's such a poisonous message. If
Mhm.
you loved me, then I could stab you and you would forgive me. The fuck?
Mhm. I'm personally not someone who believes in the word forgive.
Mm, mm.
Because I think that it's a concept that has been misunderstood and misused.
Okay.
I I can accept that in any given moment you have done the best you could with what you had
Yeah.
in that moment.
Yeah.
And I can accept that I have done the best I can with what I have in any given moment. It may not have been good enough, but knowing that that is what's happening allows me to give people grace. Because if you don't have it at the moment, what can I do to be supportive? Do I have anything to give? Right? Those become the questions as opposed to just drawing the line.
Yeah.
And because for me, forgiveness requires a level of judgment. It suddenly goes like this. It's like somehow I have to be better than you to forgive you.
Yeah.
And that's not in my wheelhouse. That's just my worldview says we're all on a level playing field, and that respect component plays in huge, but I don't have the right nor the ability to be able to stand in judgment of another.
Yeah.
I don't want to be judged.
Yeah.
Why would I judge another person?
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
those interesting kinds of things. Language is a little dicey sometimes.
It really can be. It's very violent.
Hmm?
A lot of our language is like low key violent. And high key violent, oh, you killed it. Oh, you raped that guy, I mean, it just
Mm-hmm.
and it it's, whenever you take the sting out of a word that is violent and that causes harm, you're, you're disempowering yourself, you're disempowering other
Mm-hmm.
people, you
Mm-hmm.
know, you're the whole us versus them thing never really made sense to me. I mean, it when I was an angry punk rock girl, back before I understood that there was a what is it, a spectrum gender wise.
Mm-hmm.
I fucking hated anybody in a suit. They were the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody in business, anybody who looked at me and said that I didn't belong, they were the enemy, because
Mm-hmm.
fuck you, I was born. I have to deal with this. I can either kill myself or basically live, oh, what's the best way to say it? Live at,
Unapologetically.
well, not, no, I very much lived at people that I felt
Oh.
were very judgy of me. And it
Mm-hmm.
took a long time to let go of that. It took a long time to understand that there are people who are going to judge me, but, maybe I'm the first person they've ever met who can speak to like a portion of their experience in a way that they go, oh shit, she actually does understand. And it's so sad at how simple communication can really just rock your world. It can change
Yeah.
your relationships. It can change your work relationships, your, intimate relationships. Um,
Mm-hmm.
every single sitcom I've ever seen is, oh, what's going to happen if I say this thing? And I'm like, well, then fucking say this thing and let's see what happens. But then I don't want the answer. I'm like, then what? And these were things that I watched and I laughed at over the years. And I look back and I'm like, wow, I'm right now. I'm trying not to shit on myself for not knowing what I didn't know. And
Right.
that's another big thing is that optimally, um, we should be able to look back and see how far we've come,
Mm-hmm.
how bad it was, and we're better now.
Mm-hmm.
It's not perfect, it's not great. There are a whole lot of oppressed people in the world, but it is definitely, I can get a credit card, I can have my own bank account, you know, I can finger myself on camera for money, God bless America. Right?
Let freedom ring. Yeah.
Exactly. you
Yeah.
know
But that traces back into the concept of respect, though. Without self-respect,
yeah.
I can't respect other people, right? I can't give what I don't have.
Mm,
And
yeah.
so when I see people who are consistently disrespectful, the question becomes, right? Where's the respect that you have for you? Because that's what we're giving from. And when I can accept me at that base level, right? And I grew up in an environment where I've hold on, Pippin. I found out really young that everybody lies. That made my life really easy because I was the only person who could decide whether or not something was true.
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
as a result, it didn't matter to me what people said, it mattered to me what I thought.
Mm.
So
Okay.
and I'm still quite hard to offend. You can say just about what you want, and I'm like, huh, okay. And that gift also helped me to develop that self-respect, to find it, like to like really like pull things apart and be able to like look inside for them.
Yeah.
Um, and I recognize that that's not been everybody's path.
I many years ago when I hit 50, everything changed. And I know people talk about that, but it's like all of a sudden your last fuck, like, oh, that's the last one. Oh, bye. Right. And you start going, well, who the fuck am I? What am I
Mhm.
doing all this for? Has my life gotten me what I wanted out of it? Am I feeling the way I want to feel? And if not, why is that? What's my
Yeah.
situation? How do I change my situation so that I can get that joy or that passion back, you know?
Mhm.
And I think so many of us allow ourselves to be told by the world that you can't do something. And then we go,
Mhm.
oh, okay, I guess I can't do that thing. And then there are those of us who apparently come out of the womb going, fuck you, I'm gonna do all the things. And even though that is how I live my life, still at 50, I'm still coming to terms with some stuff about, how I didn't advocate for myself in social situations or sexual situations. I didn't understand that respecting me came first for a
Yeah.
while.
Yeah. It's a big deal.
Yeah. And then when I started working on that, I started having a deeper understanding. My entire life was I'm lonely. I would like to be in a relationship, please. One relationship, please. And man, they were all shitty. Like here and there, they were okay. There were good elements to some of them. There were bad elements to some of them. But I'd never really gotten all my needs met. And then I started doing a whole lot of reading about sexual somatic healing. And I was just like, oh my God, where the fuck have I been? Where was, you know? And
Uh-huh.
so, and so I started developing better communication skills.
It's a huge one.
Yeah, I started learning what I liked and I already
Mm,
knew what I didn't like. That was most of my life, figuring out what I
that
didn't.
was easy.
Now it's all, what do I like? And the
Mhm.
more I lean into that, the more life opens up.
Well, and it's easier for us to figure out what we don't like, and it's hard for us to ask for what we do like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's, I mean, that's across the board. Sexually in our lives, in
Mhm.
our learning. I mean, all of those things, right? It's all that, especially as women, we're socially conditioned to take care of other people.
Oh, yeah.
And so when I want or need something, I have to push that aside
Yeah.
because I'm supposed to take care of you.
Yeah.
And unlearning that is a journey all by itself.
Whew. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is.
And I do see the younger generations getting started sooner than I did, which is awesome.
Yeah.
And I mean, I wish I had the ability to be able to look at them and say, "What world is it that you want?" Because, let me just get out of the way and let you create that, right? But
Yeah.
I don't have that much power yet.
There are so many women that I speak to who are our age who are just wrecked by their children, their husbands, their situations, their jobs, and it never occurred to them that they had a choice. It never occurred to them that there was another way to live your life. And I get it. Maslow's pyramid of needs is a thing. If you are starving, you can't
Mhm.
really hit a higher place because, I mean, it is the special person who in starving or dying can find peace and just be like, yeah, I'm okay. You know, for a lot of us, you know, not having enough money to eat, possibly losing your house, losing your job, you know, hundreds of $1,000s worth of medical bills, it becomes so oppressive that it's all you can see. But the
Hmm.
map is not the territory. That's just this thing that's right in front of your face that's blocking you from seeing everything that life has to offer. And
But
so,
that's also what we mean when we talk about, from my perspective, what we mean when we say we create our own reality.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, am I looking at the brick wall or am I chiseling through because I know there's something else on the other side?
yeah, yeah.
You know?
And
Yeah.
I get that, I get that not everybody is ready to hear that. Not everybody is ready to have that conversation, and that's okay. People are where they are, and it took me 50 years to get here. But I'm trying to talk with people in a way that lets them know it's like, "Oh, honey, there's so much more. There's so much
Mhm.
more." And when you know yourself, all your relationships change because you start understanding that it's about sharing your time with another person. You know, who
And
do
it's
you share your time with?
and it's also about the happy, right?
Yeah.
I have to make sure I'm happy because I'm a better partner, I'm a better mother, I'm a better business owner, I'm a better everything, right? When I'm happy.
Yeah.
And yet everything in society will tell us that I'm supposed to make sure other people are happy. Can you hear him barking?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay. He's being obnoxious.
Yeah. I feel very strongly that service to community is the highest form of worship. It's the highest form of respect.
Mhm,
Um, and again, I get that not everybody's at a point where they can do that.
mhm. But
Everybody's got to
if
work
you
up
are
to it.
but if you're in service at your own expense, you're actually in slavery.
Oh yes, this is true. There's a huge difference between being in service and, but you have to maintain your body because
Right.
it's
Change
like,
your mind.
yeah, you put oil in your car, you change your tires, but fuck this, right?
Mhm.
Like, and so many of us forget that, you know, in my mind, this is just a suit. This is an encounter suit for Earth. You know, this is how I can breathe. This is how I can drink water. This is how I can move around in the world. It's like there's this little tiny dude. It's like Men in Black with a little tiny
It's
alien dude in the brain,
think about
right? You know, and I think the sooner that we see this as a mechanism that we need to keep up,
Mhm.
there needs to be repair, there needs to be healthy food that goes in, there needs to be healthy habits that are maintained, and I'm not always so good with that, but I'm trying to get better, you know?
I'm
Um,
with you right there.
yeah, but I get the once you respect this, like the
Mhm,
suit that you're in and the knowledge that you have, everything goes through the roof. And it really comes down to education, like
mhm.
open a book, you know, read bell hooks, read Asada Shakur, you
So
know, read as many the books of as many black feminists as you can get your hands on because they had that shit right back in the 60s and earlier, you know. And
mhm,
it is that was very much what kind of kicked my ass into high gear, you know, was seeing people in poisonously oppressed situations going, nah, we're fighting,
mhm.
you know, because we have no choice. We're dying,
Right,
you know,
right.
and I would rather fight for living.
Than to fight to not die.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. You
yeah.
know, I want to fight for joy and I want to fight for passion and I want to fight for happy things, you know, good
Mhm,
community. Um, I, it just, good community and is so important, especially when you're walking around on a grid of trauma that is constantly setting off everybody around you as well as yourself.
mhm.
You know, microaggressions, whatever have you. It's just a constant barrage, especially if you're in an oppressed group. If you're in a
Mhm.
disfavored caste, man, it comes fast and hard.
Yeah.
And you gotta find a way through that, and it seems like self-respect is the way to do that, and then maintaining community, making sure everybody in your community has what they need,
Mhm.
you know?
Well, and having lived on both sides of fighting to live and living to live, um, I can honestly say that the fighting to live has given me a perspective about being able to live, and what and the simplicity of it at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Um, I get to choose my joy. I can choose to see, this beautiful tree that's like opening up in springtime, right?
Mhm.
And I can choose that joy, or I can look at it and keep walking,
Yeah. Or you
and
can look at it
so
and go, "Fucking pollen," you know? I mean, it's
I don't have any allergies. I'm one of those lucky people. Um, so yeah, and I think that for me, the self power, right? The who I am, my own personal power, right? That I hold, that I have to remember I don't ever give away. I just don't use. It's kind of like, a tool in your toolbox.
Yeah.
If I don't pull it out, I can't use it.
Yeah.
But standing in my power and choosing that as my my cloak for the day, so to speak, it changes how you move through the world.
It does.
Because I have spent enough time in my own victim mode,
Yeah.
and there's power in being the victim.
I mean, it's entertaining for part of it because it's the whole, really getting into the meat of the but it's almost masturbatory, you know?
And yeah, but and in the same way, the masturbatory concept, right? If we look at, so there's the victim drama triangle,
Yeah.
right? Victim, rescuer, perpetrator. If I remove the victim, the triangle falls apart,
Mhm.
right? That
Yeah.
victim holds all the power. When I misuse my personal power to stand in that victim place,
Mhm.
that's when everything looks bleak, everything looks dark, and it's
Yeah.
so hard to dig my way out. And
Yeah.
I'm looking for a rescuer, right? Um, as opposed to standing in my power and going, here comes a storm. What are we doing to prep?
Yeah.
Batten down the hatches, drop the sails, right? So
Yeah.
that I stay in that position of understanding that control is illusion. Control is an illusion,
Yeah, very much so.
but power is a reality, and they're not the same.
Yeah. What's your definition of power?
Power is my ability to be able to I'm going to use the word manipulate, not in a negative sense, but in the way of manipulating, right? I can move, shift, and change. Um, whatever is in front of me, whether that's circumstance, whether that's situation, whether that's a person, whether that's me, right? I have the ability to be able to manipulate that and to choose a different perspective, to choose a different route, to, sometimes it's about do something different.
Mhm.
Um, but it's all about my choice. And my power is about my choice. And I get to choose what it all looks like.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes that's the lesser of two evils. And sometimes in the midst of the storm, it's about what am I choosing to, who am I choosing to protect and how am I choosing to protect them?
That's a good way of putting it. That's a good way of
Yeah.
putting it.
So, yeah.
So you taught about diversity for a long time.
Uh-huh. Over 30 years. Yep. We started back in the day when we used to do caucuses where you had people of color and white people, and you put them in groups and called them caucuses.
Yeah.
And it didn't occur to us then that we were um, cementing that divide, like we were
Mhm.
still running down the same ruts
Yeah.
of division.
Yeah.
And I've About 12, 15 years ago, I figured it all out.
Mhm.
That was when I started to tell people I could change the world if they'd let me. Um, and
Yeah.
it's centers on that respect.
Yeah.
Because if each one of us has and applies the skills and tools to respect ourselves, has the skills and tools to respect others, and has the tools and skills and applies them to respect the planet, we could change the world in one generation.
Yeah.
Really, really simple. Not easy.
No, no, not easy. Even with everything laid out. Like, okay, this is exactly what you need to do. Say, these are the steps you need to make. And it's a lot of people kind of
Mhm,
sidestep it, you
mhm.
know.
And the other side of diversity um that is my one of my strong tenets is about intersectionality.
Yeah.
We have a tendency. So when I say the word diversity, most people think about black and white, right? They think about race.
Yeah.
And the reality is that none of us is any one thing, and we are not what I call the trifecta: um, gender, race, class. We
Yeah.
are so much more than that.
Oh yeah.
And when we stop at what we see and start to make assumptions, right? Our brain turns into a far more socially conditioned beast than it does of anything about compassion, standing in my power, being able to interact effectively, creating relationships, right? But
Yeah.
when I look at people and I go, I know what you look like, I know what assumptions I can make, but why don't you tell me about you?
Mm.
Right? Because that's where
Mm.
the learning happens.
Yeah.
And so the invitation instead of the barrier. Um, and yet we as humans are hardwired. If I'm afraid of it, if it's unfamiliar, kill it.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because it threatens my sense of self, my sense of meaning.
Or safety.
Yeah. True.
I mean,
True.
at the core, right, it's about safety. Whether what is being threatened is my identity or my life, it's still seen as a threat,
Yeah.
right? And so, yeah, yeah.
It is
So,
immense how much life opens up once you truly feel safe.
hell yeah.
You know, it cannot be understated. Um, it is it is frustrating that so many people don't understand that,
Mhm.
and so many people seem so driven to knock people violently out of their place of safety every day through, "Hey, baby, nice top." All of a sudden,
Mhm.
it's like, "Whoa." And when these people, they know what they're doing.
Mhm.
They know what they're doing. We can be
There's
surely we can be better than this.
there's an interesting there's a book called Pitch Anything in the Business World, written by a guy by the name of Boren Clough. I always want to call him Olaf, so I have to think about what his name is. But he talks about frames, and he talks about social situations, and every social situation has a frame, and
Mhm,
everyone has a power frame.
mhm,
And when I began to understand power frames, I began to understand the dynamic of privilege and marginalization,
mm,
because the power frame is something that is socially conditioned into you based on your privilege.
mhm.
And you don't, it's to the point of which you're standing in the middle of the frame, you can't see the frame,
Yeah, yeah.
right? And people who are in marginalized groups that counter your privilege, not only can they see your frame, they know they ain't got one.
Mhm,
And so the dynamics that begin, because the way that he talks about it is that inevitably within a relationship, as soon as you come together, it doesn't take very long for those frames to clash, and only
mhm,
one can win. And that's the concept then of how we experience that concept of privilege and marginalization.
mhm.
And it's that idea of how hard it is to explain, for example, to men the things that they unwittingly do that support rape culture.
Mm. Yeah, Yeah,
right?
they get too caught up in I'm not a rapist, and it's like nobody said you were, genius. We're trying to
Mhm.
talk about like everybody knows. Like if you had a daughter, you would threaten the guy dating her. So
Mhm.
you know what's going on, you
Right.
know. And it just
And
it, mm,
and yet they will do and say things that are, I mean, you talked about language, right? And the interesting parts of language.
mhm,
And it's the little nuances, right? That in terms of violence. Think about the things that are violent that are integrated into our culture. Bullet points,
mhm,
right? You killed that presentation.
mhm,
Right? So we start to understand then how, because that's all part of rape culture. That power and dominance component is a
mhm.
part of rape culture. So we can see how it's infiltrated into our everyday language.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so how do we pull that all apart one step at a time? And so much of it goes back to that self-respect. If I don't have enough self-respect to be able to take feedback, how and respond by going, "Oh, that's interesting. Thank you," instead of going, "What do you mean?"
yeah,
Right? We don't get anywhere.
yeah, yeah.
And so I
But
love that you
that's
talk
the
about
point with a lot of these conversations. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk over you.
that, and that's why I love when you talk about compassion, because at the core of respect is compassion,
Yeah.
and it's the ability for me to be able to stand in a place. So empathy in my culture, empathy is shared suffering. It's the I see you suffer, I have suffered, therefore I want to mitigate your suffering.
Mm,
Compassion is the act of mitigating suffering, right? And so compassion is the action word to empathy.
yeah. Yeah.
And so when we think about those two and how they interact, we see how respect is at the core of both of them,
Mm,
because it's me and it's you, and it's the come together component of how we can do that in a way that damages neither of us
yeah.
and benefits both of us, right?
Yeah.
And that's what respect does.
Yeah, we can both
So
stand in our authenticity, in our authentic selves, being respected and
mhm,
having dignity and feeling
mhm,
safety. And in my mind, that is the pinnacle of relationships, is to be
mhm.
able to feel that around other people, especially the people in your life that you love.
And that you want to be around.
Yeah. Yeah,
Because,
right?
you know, there are some people I love and I don't want to be around them.
Yeah, I'm familiar, you know, and it occurs to me to sit down with them and say, so who hurt you? You know, where on the doll did life hurt you?
Mhm,
So that we can try to talk about it. But there are so many people who are like, fuck you, I'm not talking about that man.
mhm.
And it's frustrating because the the further down the road, I don't want to use like a higher or lower, because that kind of asserts that there is a better or worse. But
Right.
further down the road with this, you start looking back and seeing just bodies of people who are just covered, like metaphysically covered in rashes and boils and constantly scratching, and you're just like, are they possessed by a demon? Because it kind of looks like they're possessed by a demon. And in a way they are, you know,
Mhm,
it's they integrate the messages that they're not enough, they're not good enough, and all the other limiting bullshit that society sells us. Um,
mhm.
and I just want to look back, and I want so badly to be like, boop, you're healed, and it doesn't fucking work like that. And it's so
Nope.
frustrating.
And that's because we first have to put it on our own. We have to put that all of that ointment, we have to do it for ourselves.
Yeah, yeah,
And that's the part that gets really hard,
yeah. But
and
without
and
community, that becomes
yes.
almost impossible. You know, most of the people that I talk to, that I meet, I'm like, do you have somebody in your life, anybody in your life that you feel you can be authentic and vulnerable with? And if the answer is no, that's not that's not really conducive to healing. If there's
Right.
nobody that you can talk to, and I think that's one of the reasons that therapy is touted so much, because we don't really sit with our friends in moments of discomfiture around relationship issues, sexual issues, emotional issues, and just
Trauma.
hold space for them,
Mhm.
while they process it.
My best friend is the one who taught me that sometimes the best thing we can do is to stand in witness.
Yeah.
So if you come to me to tell me how terribly awful things are for you, because I am loving and caring, my first response is I want to fix it.
Yeah.
But 90% of us just need to be heard.
Oh, yeah.
And if you think about, any kind of recovery, alcohol, addiction, sexual abuse, whatever, right?
Yeah.
The story has to be heard before you're ready
Yeah.
to actually do the healing.
Yeah.
And I contend within the system of oppression, it's part of our hangup. When we get angry Black people, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I am by no means in a stereotype way, but we say, right, angry Black people. Most of those people have not felt heard.
Yeah.
They want their story to be heard, to be honored. My goodness, I hear your story. That was awful,
Yeah.
right? That's what we need to be able to do, because you cannot reach back and hold on to suffering and simultaneously reach forward and heal.
Yeah.
You have to let go. But
Yeah.
most of us can't let go until that story's been heard.
Well, you have
And
to,
so how do we?
the first part of it is acknowledging it. You have to
Hmm?
acknowledge it before you let it go. And there are so many people who still want to think that, oh, slavery wasn't so bad. My, great grandpappy had slaves and he paid them and they danced and they were great. And it's this assumption that in a world where 40-year-old men consistently date 16-year-old girls,
Mhm.
and you have consistent servile messages placed on what I considered the disfavored caste as opposed to the favored caste of white, well-heeled gentlemen. Um, it's a recipe for disaster,
Mhm.
and there are so many conversations that need to be had around this, and I'm starting to see them, which is
Mhm.
nice, but I don't know if that's surface, or if a lot of people are digging really deep and going, wow, that's fucked up. We need to start holding ourselves and other people around us accountable.
But this is part of my frustration with the diversity world. We are still in the diversity 101 conversations again and again and again and again. And
Yeah.
it's getting people to 102. And
Yeah.
I mean, I can give you the litany of the mistakes that have been made and why we are where we're at. The
Yeah.
problem is there's not, there's a big brouhaha, right? Anti-DEI
Hmm.
movement. There are three problems. One, diversity, equity, and inclusion is not the work, it's the goal,
Hmm. Exactly. That's
right?
your end point.
Right. And so which lends itself to one of the other big problems. We tell people here are all the things you're supposed to do, but we don't give them any tools and skills to do it with,
Yeah.
right? And so when we start to look at are we changing that?
Hmm.
The answer is no. And then the third really big issue is that we keep trying to do the work within systems that are built on the system of oppression. So it is basically a
Hmm.
virus implanted that the system then attacks to get rid of,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And until we collectively see those things, recognize those things, it's not going to change.
Yeah. At least the I believe the paradigm is 3.5% of the population needs to agree that abuse is bad before it stops, because enough people will start going, that's fucked up and you need to stop it or you need to leave my house.
Hmm?
There are
Well,
far too many people that are comfortable during goddamn Thanksgiving, meals and
hmm?
Christmas meals. This is not the time to, like, these are times to have the needful conversations. If anything is going to change.
Hmm? But what's the cost of change, particularly for the favored?
Oh, they
When
lose. They lose. They lose power. They
and
lose
status.
credibility and status.
When you have
Then
experienced privilege, equity can feel like oppression,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And it's if you have always been Pippin, if you have always been, though, in that group of white men vying for those CEO positions, right?
Yeah.
That's a big fish in a little pond. We let everybody else in the pond, and you now become a little fish in a big pond.
Yeah.
That's scary,
Yeah.
right? And so those are the conversations that we have to start to have
Yep.
around what's the experience on both sides. Because we have a tendency to say oppression is bad, we need to change that. I don't disagree, but there's another side to the equation.
Yeah.
And if we don't balance out the sides of the equation, we don't get anywhere.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I understand that I keep seeing these articles and videos that there is a crisis of meaning for men in the world. And now all of a sudden men are having difficulty having sex because apparently that's the only thing men want, even though there are plenty of men in my life who, aren't okay. I need a car and I need money so that I can get pussy. It's like the weirdest combination of things. Of course they're going to see us like a coin slot,
Right.
I mean, because that's a way the conversation has been worded for years,
Hold on 1 second.
Uh-oh. I feel like I should be playing some music.
I am back. I have a little child knocking on the door repeatedly, which is part of why the dog is barking.
Oh man. I'm seeing more of this movement in Korea and in other countries where women are just like, nope, not dating.
Interesting.
Not
Yeah.
I'm not dating. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to develop who I am. I'm going to start figuring out who I am, and then I might look for a guy. And the way that I've always heard the idea of marriage presented was that the women trap the men with the baby, and then the men can't escape. I'm like, motherfucker, I couldn't open a checking account on my own until 1970. Fuck off with me trapping you with a baby. And how many men stealth? How many men want really? Like, it's just bizarre, man.
Well, but it's also realizing, so we can get into the oppression Olympics, right? I'm more oppressed than you are.
Exactly.
And that's doesn't serve anybody.
Mm-mm.
I'm not I'm not in any way, shape, or form dissing the concept that when we exacerbate, more and more and more oppressive experiences, things get worse and worse, harder and harder.
Yeah.
That's logical.
Oh yeah.
But when we stand on a position and say, it's worse for me than it is for you, or my situation needs to be first, right?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
That's where that's that competition component. We're also hardwired for competition, but that competition component is also what works really well in terms of the divide and conquer.
Yeah.
As long as I can keep infighting going, I don't have to worry.
Oh
If you
yeah.
think about
My
things like
enemies will eliminate themselves and I won't have to work. Yeah.
If you think about things like the women's movement and even Black Lives Matter, a lot of what went down and that compromised those movements and still does is the inside, is the same problems on the outside working on the inside because the inside never figured out how to manage them. So in the women's movement, right, women of color felt like they were being dissed. Women who experienced disabilities, right? The whole class scene, right?
Yeah.
It was all going on inside, just like on the outside.
Yeah.
It's virtually impossible if you haven't fixed it on the inside to be able to turn around and go, hey, you guys have to fix it.
Yeah.
Right. And so until we can figure out how to get that right in terms of our own movements, whatever they are, we're never going to get the larger population to be able to figure it out with us.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I'm I'm doing my best to try to just speak person by person
Hmm.
in the hopes that someone goes, wow, I never thought of it that way before. And then that maybe encourages them to read, maybe encourages them to learn more, because there is, I mean, we can all get sad about the video of the I think 13-year-old girl who had to marry a 29-year-old man. Um, and I don't remember which country, but they were a Muslim couple. Um, and you can get angry about that. You can get angry about what's been happening in Ethiopia and Yemen and the Sudan for generations, Democratic Republic of the Congo. There is literally plenty to get upset about that's going on right now. But when you reach into the way back and you look at the way that this country was formed, that nobody wants to talk about, how this country was literally built on the backs of slaves.
On land that was stolen.
Yep. Stolen. The indigenous people were either outright murdered through medical genocide or systemic genocide. But no one wants to have that conversation because we're number one. But if we don't examine ourselves, how do we know ourselves? If we don't look at everything,
Hmm.
how can we possibly address it? And I think the enormity is what stops people. I think it's terrifying for people is that it's just so big. So many men they can contemplate, that they don't want their daughter dating any of their friends because they know how those guys are. But they don't think that the whole, it's the bear and the man meme.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I love how everybody's mystified that we're all choosing the bear.
Where?
Yeah, and that the reason for that is we're somehow going to fuck the bear or move in with the bear or have kids with the bear. And it
When in reality, the bear is just more predictable.
exactly. You know, we
Yeah.
it's and we are driven to feel safe. Biologically, we are driven to feel safe and reproduce, but we're driven to go somewhere safe so that we can eat, so that we can sleep in safety, and so that we can go out and hunt the next day as little critters, right?
Hmm.
If we don't feel safe, then that opens up a whole can of traumas and frustrations. And how are you supposed to get your head around it without having a safe mirror to see yourself in, right?
And how can we find within ourselves a way to create our own safety,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I have a saying that my family knows and loves quite well, which is if World War III happens, I and the cockroaches will survive.
Mm,
And that is built on my survivor instincts and my awareness that I can keep me safe
mm,
no matter what's going on around me.
yeah.
That sense of safety, it allows me to discern situations that I shouldn't put myself in, first and foremost, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And secondly, it means that whatever happens in front of me, I got this.
Yeah. Yeah.
And those are skills that we don't teach.
No. And there's skills that a lot of people are hesitant to learn. It's like if I could tell you how to become a lie detector for human beings, right? Because once you know yourself, everybody's full of shit.
Mhm. Everybody
Authenticity,
lies.
authenticity knows authenticity,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
You
yeah,
know, and it becomes a whole lot easier to go, wow, that's shit I shouldn't even be involved with,
right.
you know?
I'm over here, you're over there. Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Mhm.
I wish you healing and clarity on the other side of the country.
Yeah, or at
You know?
least on the other side of that wall.
Yeah, yeah, just away from me. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
Yep.
you know.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely, definitely. Ah. People are fun.
Oh, they're fantastic. What would you say was the most difficult thing to get across? If you had to pick one thing.
To teach privileged people about privilege.
Mm,
It's like teaching someone who's standing in the ocean, and all they can see is water, that there is land. Not only is there land, but you have to treat land differently than you treat water.
mm,
And it's a tough sell.
yeah. It's
So,
very sad that that kind of seems baked into us, that unless we've directly experienced it, I don't know if I believe it. I mean,
mhm.
even with me, I had seen like these bright blue water in Cuba and Miami and all of these places in pictures. But until I actually saw it in real life, I was like, oh shit, it actually exists, right? You know?
Uh-huh. Yep. Yeah.
Same thing with the redwoods. I was like, there's no way a tree can get that big. And then you stand in front of these majestic sequoias
Mhm.
and redwoods and these giants who have seen generations of people come and
Thousands of generations.
yeah, make out in the forest, fucking cars. I'm just like that. I can only imagine what trees think of human
The
beings.
stories they could tell.
I mean, I would think it's the
Yeah.
same thing that us looking down at ants and going, well, they're very industrious, aren't they? They're just going to and fro. Who knows what they're doing, right?
'Cause we don't see what anything other than the little space that's right there,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
What book would you recommend for anybody that's looking to have a deeper understanding of their privilege and their place in that
Mm,
spectrum?
I would selfishly tell you to read my book, um, Between the Bars. I can't remember the subtitle for nothing.
Oh, hang on, hang on.
Come here.
Between the Bars, a new framework for creating
Framework.
change and social justice. There we go.
Yes, because that is for me diversity 101. And if everybody understood that, we could move on to the next layer of
And
conversation.
it's a fantastic book.
Thank you.
Anybody that's listening, definitely go get a copy. It's not a tome. It's readable, like in an
Mhm.
afternoon, and
Yeah.
it's one of those things you can refer back to over and over again. That the concepts are simplistic and it's really straightforward.
Thank you. And one of my biggest preaches is that the way that we begin to, so I use the system of oppression. For me, I use a cage as the um visual analogy, and everybody's in it, right? Privilege, target, we're all in it together.
Yeah.
And the way that we blur the lines is all of us have somewhere that we need an ally and somewhere we can be an ally.
Mm,
And if we are reaching over those lines and creating those connections and those relationships, one human at a time, that's how we begin to blur those lines. That's how we make change.
fuck yeah.
And it's something I can do, you can do, and the more of us who are doing it, the bigger, the better, the faster.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I would go so far as to say, and I've said this multiple times before, self-improvement is activism.
Hmm. Yeah.
And
And
being
it's radical,
it
radical activism.
it really is. I mean, you don't need to be banging pots outside of an embassy to be an activist. You don't have to be on a firing line. You don't have to be putting your life in danger, you know?
No.
I mean, but you do have to be putting your ego in danger, and that can be a really scary place, right?
Yes.
You
Yeah.
know? Because you're like, eventually you're gonna come face to face with some uncomfortable truths, and you're gonna have to have a conversation with yourself about them, you know?
Hmm.
And if you can have that conversation with yourself, you can have that conversation with other people,
Hmm.
maybe find a group of people that you can have that conversation with who go, you know what, that's a really good idea. And then it becomes like a shampoo commercial from the 1980s, and they tell two friends and they tell two friends, and so on and so on.
Mm-hmm. Pretty sure that was Breck, but I can't
Was it
remember for
Breck?
sure.
Oh my
I
God, there were
think
so
so.
many.
I'm pretty sure. I know.
Oh man. Is there any piece of wisdom that you feel is otherwise necessary to impart other than what's already been stated?
Um, Probably one of the greatest tools that I use on an ongoing basis that serves me well is one of Miguel Ruiz's The Four Agreements, which is don't take things personally. When
Mm,
I remember that everything that you say, everything that you do is from your perspective, is from your experience.
yeah,
And I can leave that as your perspective, your experience. That doesn't mean we can't agree, right? That doesn't mean we can't like deepen our conversation, but it
yeah,
does mean that what you have to say doesn't have to influence my story, my feelings, my reality, right? And so that allows me to be able to move through the world. And I mean, I've had the opportunity to sit down with an individual I would call a nonviolent white supremacist, someone who has totally opposite belief systems from me,
yeah,
and have a really good conversation, not trying to convince either, either one of us trying to convince the other,
yeah,
but really about tell me, help me understand. What does it look like? Really, that's interesting. Tell me more, right?
yeah,
Without taking offense, without raising our voices. We even laughed a few times,
yeah.
right? Neither one of us walk away having changed our mind, but we both walk away with new insights and new information.
Yes, yes,
That's why I can do it, right? I don't have to take in what anyone says about or to me.
yeah,
I get to make the choice because it's all about you.
yeah, yeah. Well said. Do you think an hour is enough, or do you got more in you?
I'm trying to manage too many parts in this immediate moment with a dog that's going nuts and a child still trying to knock on the door. Love grandchildren.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking to me about this. I really appreciate you sharing your time with me on a Sunday.
I appreciate you as well, and I look forward to more.
Awesome.
You take care of you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you everybody who tuned in. I appreciate you. I had not been looking to see if anybody was giving us messages to read during the chat. I apologize. I got a little too animated and excited about the conversation this time around. But I will see you guys in a couple of weeks. Thanks so much for following.